morning all, my name is Goodwin, and coming towards the end of my career. I'm going to last a few more years yet because I've got a slight problem in my life. Maya Rose Goodwin down there, bit of an afterthought. And my alright, I'm going to get in trouble for that one. But I've been involved in the outdoors my entire working career. Done various bits and pieces in the mountains, sea kayaking, whitewater kayaking, and now very much known as a canoe person. And the subject is really starting in the canoe, and I'm going to give a wide range of things. Some I hope will inspire folks to go and do things and to answer some of the questions. My daughter Maya Rose got to get hold of her first paddle on day one. So as soon as she was born, as soon as she was out there, cleaned up and sorted, little paddle into her hand. So she had not a lot of chance but to be a canoeist. Have you? No? Really, I didn't want a little girl. She asked me one day what I wanted. Mummy wanted a little girl. I wanted a little frog, really, but she's pretty good. So there you go. So, the canoe. I've done masses in this country. In fact, my reputation in many ways with an Irish sea crossing, big coastal journeys was built in the UK. But the canoe really is something that is crafted. There's been various forms out, dugout canoes and whatever, but the landscape of the eastern part of Canada, through Ontario, through Manitoba, through Quebec, is a landscape that was scoured by the ice sheets and then infilled in the last 8,000 years or so by water and marsh and bog. And in summer, the only way to travel through that landscape until modern times was on the water. And so you have this combination of a really good material, birch bark, but birch bark from Siberia is, if anything, at least as good a quality, if not better, but they never came up with really good quality canoes. And the difference is, going back to it, is the landscape. The landscape demands something. And once you get human minds thinking on something and refining it, it becomes something very special. So it permeates the culture there. And this is a pictograph on Archery Lake on the Bloodvein River. And you've got a picture there of a medicine man, but also underneath you've got a canoe loaded with people. Underneath the canoe is actually a snake, and I've forgotten the name for it, I apologise. But you lead an offering for those particular spirits, because if you upset them, that snake is the one that's going to give a good flash of its tail. You're going to end up in the bottom of the rapid or in the lake swimming or the like. So the nice thing with canoe that I like is there is a tradition going back thousands of years. And that one, some of you will recognise. Some TV guy, Ray somebody or other, made that one. Ray Mears, and I was out there filming with him afterwards, and that's the birch bark canoe he made with Pinnock Smith. Quite a spiritual moment to actually go into that. So you've got all this going on behind. So some people get into the canoe because it follows on from bushcraft. It meshes totally with that world. So some people, the idea of a canoe, it fits very much with what they believe there. Other reasons for canoe. Well, I meet a whole variety of people because what I do is I work as an instructor. Some of the time with Frontier, a lot of the time for myself. And I'll meet people, and really what they want is something to do with the family. Go out on the local river, the local canal, the local lake, and that's their ambition, and they want the skills to be able to do that safely. Other people have a big ambition to do something. I had a guy earlier this year who hadn't really paddled at all, and he said, I want to do a 30-day wilderness trip in Canada on my own. And he's given me a minimum amount of time to give him the skill set. So doing all the twiddly strokes and everything is really almost irrelevant. What he needs to know, what it is about that environment, what he needs to know about the wind, being on a river, being on a lake, So it's more about the knowledge of the environment than the knowledge of the strokes. Give him enough stroke work, and he's gone off to Canada. He's going to do, in fact, I managed to convince him not to do the really remote stuff, but remote enough. He's going to do 25 days on his own on the Yukon River. Should he not be eaten by a grizzly bear, then I'm looking forward to the reports when he comes back. But the nice thing with the Yukon, although a lot of it's very remote, there are several places where he can get off the river. There are small towns. So he's got the possibility of breaking the journey up if there is a problem. And there are other people who will do that journey each year. So some people, it's that big ambition. And what sort of skill set? This is an area called the Boundary Waters in Minnesota, and it's a series of lakes. And in fact, this canoe area historically is very, very important because it's actually the border with Canada. And when they divvied up the border, in a lot of places in the west, the border follows natural features. But when you get across beyond mid-Canada and westwards, they tend to draw is straight lines, except in the Boundary Waters. And the reason for that, the main canoe route west, and again before the railways, the main canoe route west was so important that both the British government and the American government divvied it up so that the border ran along the canoe route. Now you're not allowed to head into, if you've gone in via the United States, you're not allowed to go on into Canada. But both countries recognise the importance of the route. So the portage trail, where you have to carry the boats from one part to the next, will actually sometimes be in Canada, sometimes be in the US, and you are more than welcome to be in either country on that. But as entering from the US, I'm not allowed to camp in Canada, and vice versa. Using very, very lightweight canoes, it is a flat water environment. And in fact, the type of canoes, the type of paddles we were using there, you don't use lots of strokes. The paddles are designed to push the boat in a straight line. The boat is designed to go in a straight line. So the actual skill with a paddle is relatively low. And there were a couple of people on that trip, it was associated with Winona Canoes, who'd never really paddled canoe before. And they were absolutely fine. What you need to understand is when not to be on the lakes. You needed some navigation sense, and you need those bushcraft skills or those outdoor skills to be able to live in that environment and rein it in a bit. So, you know, working with an axe, working with a knife, you're in a remote place in these, and the communication isn't that easy. So you're a little bit more careful. This is a lake where the level is being topped up by beaver. And one of the clue is there's lots of dead trees. When they build the dam, it floods the area, the roots get flooded, the trees die. And there in the middle is a beaver lodge, but it means that the edges of these are quite boggy. And the main issue on this lake, because it's quite a small one, so even a wind's not going to be a big issue, you might not be able to push into it, but you're not going to be in any great danger from wind. It's finding where the next part of the portage trail begins, because that ability to carry the boat between places is really very important indeed. There we've just come down a creek, and we actually managed to paddle further than we expected because of the beaver dam raising the water level. In the days of the birch bark canoes, they actually had hunted the beaver almost to extinction through these areas, and engineers had to go back in and put dams in so they could paddle the canoes through. By removing the beaver, the thing they wanted, they couldn't actually paddle in those areas. And that's going into the portage. Skill level, you wouldn't need to be able to do very much, but you need to be able to make some judgments. That's going to be the key thing. There we've got the portage trail, and Jennifer is actually in Canada. She's an illegal immigrant. They're about to arrest her. The metal peg marks the border. So there's a question for you, and we'll come back to it, which is buoyancy aids, life jackets, whether you wear them or not. Mike and Heather in that boat are racers. The weather is very fine, the water is warm, there's lots of things in the canoe that float, well, everything is waterproofed. Should they capsize, which is exceptionally unlikely, Both of them are good swimmers, water's warm, and there's things to hold on to, and there are other boats around. And we'll come back to that point with the safety if you're just doing things for yourself. So will that just go on to the video if I click? This is a part of it. If you're a bushcrafter, you love the outdoors, this is a campsite on one of our Blood Vein River trips with Frontier. So part of it, you know, some people want to go there for the canoeing. For other people, the canoeing is a means to an end. They want to live in this environment. It is more difficult. If you walk into the woods and you find yourself a nice spot, you've unloaded your car and whatever, and you walk into the woods, that's one thing. But setting up a camp at the end of the day's paddling is a different matter. You may be cold, you may be tired, you may be wet, and that's where really good habits have to be ingrained in you. And so very often I'm one of the quickest, Paul's quick at getting his camp stuff set up. But to actually start using bushcraft skills as part of a journey takes a lot more energy. And, you know, you get amazing nights. But you get the opposite as well. This was an absolutely colossal thunderstorm that came through. It came through 2 nights, it rumbled through the next day, came through the second night as well. And it was absolutely wild. Normally I'll count between the flash of light and the bang of the thunder, and I wasn't managing to count. It was that close in on us. So those are reasons to go canoeing. The romance of the boat, taking it on the plane. But if you come back to this country, particularly with kids, then playing is a lot of it. Maya's been out in the boat, she's been on a stand-up board, well, part on stand-up board, a lot of time jumping in the water and getting extremely wet, which is really important, isn't it, and having fun. So for children having fun, these are actually adults, these.
Oh, no way.
And things like learning strokes, well, obviously I'm going to try and flog some copies of my book, but strokes and books only work so far. Not easy to learn from a book. If you've got a bit of knowledge, and the book's a really good top up to it. Part of the thing with that's practicing strokes. If you're facing other, you can actually help each other on that. Just a thing from the book, a thing called a J stroke. But the dangers. If you've not done a lot around water, Dennis Rumsfeld came out with some strange phrases in his time. There are known knowns, known unknowns, but there are unknown unknowns. And it's the things you don't know about that are going to cause the real issue. Every time there is a very nasty accident in the paddling world, which generally happens with young people, it happens with inexperienced people, my business is boosted because you've got parents who love the fact that going into the canoe is brilliant with kids, but they actually want to learn, and they turn up and they think they're going to learn about the strokes. That's one thing, but it's learning about that environment. So danger. You look at that, and if you look at it from an health and safety point of view, kids are in a cave, they've got no helmets on. What's the risk? And it's minimal. If you have no risk, it's hardly worth doing. The kids learn nothing. What I set these kids as a challenge was, I've taught you some strokes, now you can go in this cave, but I want you to do it really slowly, I want you to do it really quietly, and manoeuvre around. And they had a whale of a time. And other people said, but they should have helmets on, they should have helmets on. But I changed the nature of what they were doing to being slow and peaceful. If a kid bumps their head into that in slow motion, that's not a risk. That's about learning about life. Yeah? When Maya was beginning to walk and move around our garden, I did a risk assessment of the garden. Some places, if she fell off, she was going to break because the drops were big. We put fences in. She fell down there, she was going to get a bruise or sore spot, and she was going to learn. And the same with doing things like this. I don't wrap them up in cotton wool, but just understand what you're doing. Boats are very, very susceptible to wind. And we were playing around here. And my friend there, he'd been actually stood on the gunnels of his boat. It's called gunnel bobbing, bouncing around. But this can equally well happen if you're sitting on your own in a boat on the seat. You do something silly, the boat goes out, and if it's windy, as it goes out, you go over the side, the wind catches the boat and just shoves it away from you and puts it back upright. And one of the most embarrassing things in the world is to see your boat moving away faster than you can swim. So wind is a real issue with the canoe in lots of situations. Big idyllic lakes, so here we go. Which way's the wind going? It's going offshore. Those particular ripples are very, very indicative. Not a good place for a beginner. Because while you're practicing your stroke or whatever you're doing, you're playing around, just very gently you get further and further away from the shore. And as you get further away, it actually gets stronger. This is exactly the same wind on the other side of the island. And actually, with a novice, I'm safe in many ways. If I'm not supervising them, they're safer in those conditions because when they do something wrong, they're being blown back on shore. And if you have a look at this little lad, I mean, really, it's one of his first times in a canoe ever, and we're in a huge bay, and my launch point is at the far end of the bay. But I knew very well if I launched at the far end of the bay, the first thing they're going to do is get blown down to here. So what I did, I rafted all the canoes, we paddled down to there, then we could let the kids loose. They could do anything they wanted pretty well, because when they stopped paddling, they were coming back to the shore. And as a novice, you need to think about that. Where's the wind going to take you? And yeah, I'm not, this is a trip round Puffin Island off the Welsh coast. Now, in a big wind, on a spring tide, strong tide, this is not a place to be in a canoe. I've been there in sea kayak and it gets monstrous. I had waited, because I'm working a lot of weekends, I'd waited nearly a year to be able to take Maya to this spot. I so wanted her to see the seals from the canoe. Was it good? Yes, it was good, she nodded. But it was a summer weekend, the water's warm. I've got flare, because I was a sea kayaker as well, I've got a VHS radio with me, I've got flares with me. But more than that, there's so many boats out on the weekend like that. Go there in February, or let's say go there in October, midweek, you might not see another boat. So not only do I have my own skill out there, but also if it goes wrong, I have planned for what happens. VHF radio, I've got a set of flares, but to be honest, I won't get a chance to use that because there's so many boats around, they're going to save us anyway. And all of us make error and make mistakes, and you have to live in that world. And that's Lena and Maya heading back across the Sound. Again, put that on a really windy day, put that with a big tide on it, that becomes monstrous out there. I've been there in a sea kayak and I've been frightened, thinking I don't really want to be here at this time. But that day was fine in the canoe. The other thing is temperature and water temperature. And one of the issues we have in paddle sport is, what do you dress for? Do you dress for being out of the water? In which case, you can't really, so you get a warm day, you dress light, but the water temperature may be extremely low. But we can't paddle in survival suits, it doesn't work. Paddle in a dry suit on the wrong day and you're sweltering with heat. And this is an error that a lot of people make. Nice environment. This is Llyn Tegid, Bala Lake, and it's one of my usual spots to work in. And this is a father with his two kids. He's only got two buoyancy aids. One's his kid's size, one is his buoyancy aid. But to make it safe, he's put his buoyancy aid on the kid, which doesn't work terribly well, and he's decided that he won't wear a buoyancy aid. Now, that is the end of March. The water temperature is probably around 3 to 4 degrees centigrade. If you plop into water of that temperature, dressed like that, or even dressed in my normal paddling kit, then you're going to get a thing called cold shock, and you really need to know about cold shock if you're in cold water. It's an involuntary response. It closes it constricts the chest, closes the muscles around the neck, and it's desperate to get air into your lungs. Out at sea, and I'm not talking of a canoe environment, people drown through cold shock because the gasp is so much, they take on too much water quickly. You need to know about it because it's a psychological thing. It passes after a minute, but after a minute you've got a limited time. This guy probably doesn't know about cold shock. Why am I going to tell him? Because I see it most working days and I'm fed up of being told to go away in no uncertain terms. If it's a kiddie, I will be quite brutally pointed about it. If it's an adult, I'm sorry, I've told too many people over a long period of time. So he's unlikely to fall in, and he did not. We kept an eye on him. And he was okay. But if he gets cold shock, then his ability to swim is gone pretty instantly. It doesn't matter how good a swimmer you are. Maya, my daughter, is a really good swimming pool swimmer, but we make sure she swims a lot in cold water because there's a heck of a difference. Somebody drowned out of one of these at this spot, a little bit offshore. The divers went in, he went out for an evening paddle with his mates, they were playing him around, he capsized, cold shock, he went and he sank. He never came back up. They sent the divers in, they found the body 30 foot down, same place. So there is no need of it. This is the whole point, there is no need. With a buoyancy aid on, you're fine. The other thing about the cold is if it's that temperature water, you probably only have a few minutes before your hands cease working. Within 10 minutes, your arms and legs aren't going to be working because the body is protecting core temperature, and so it's taking the blood out of those. Your dexterity is gone in 10 minutes. I was chatting to a guy on the lifeboat, and they'd got somebody with a sit-on-top fishing kayak, and he'd gone out in the Menai Straits in the wider part. He'd fallen in, and somebody had spotted him offshore, holding on to his sit-on-top, half mile offshore. Sent the lifeboat out, lifeboat pulled him out of the water. The guy was wearing a life jacket. He had not inflated it. And they said, why didn't you inflate it? He said, well, these little cylinders are really expensive and I didn't want to. And the lifeboat guy works in the chandlery, and the lifeboat guy said, well, why? He said, well, I would have inflated it if it got really bad. He said, I'll tell you what, I'll replace the cylinder, replace it. He couldn't do the twist on the cylinder. His hands didn't work. So if you're in an emergency in cold water, you've got 10 minutes at the most, and then your hands cease to work, your legs cease to work. You've got to make a plan to go with things. So don't underestimate cold water. How regular is that? This is 2 weeks ago, water was still relatively cold. That speck out on the lake is a lady with a brand new inflatable. And there she is, suitably equipped. If I walked by and they'd sort of chatted to me, I would have said, you really need to get a buoyancy aid, but I can't keep going up to people and doing that. The other thing is with little children, my daughter loves being in cold water, she loves being wet, don't you? Yeah, she really loves it. She loves splashing her dad as well. But they'd be great up to a point, and then they lose heat very, very quickly. So when I'm in a boat with her on something like that, I'm kneeling for stability. We've got a grab bag with spare clothing with us, we've got shelter with her, and we've normally got several boats. If I'm a boat on my own, then I'm very cautious. Again, you know, I've thrown in the difference between a life jacket. When she was little, we had a life jacket, so most of the buoyancy is on the chest, buoyancy behind the head, so whatever she does, it turns her face up. But actually it's quite cumbersome, so most of the time she wears a buoyancy aid. And strapped, because children's shapes, when they're in the water, the buoyancy aid comes up round here and it's a bit of a nuisance. But just playing with water. Early trip with the kids, canoes rafted up for stability, but also because the other family hadn't done much paddling, so just to make life easy. And with kids, it really is about being on the shore, playing, making castles, throwing stones, and generally plopping around. And the number of times I've put a long, long rope on the boat and just sent the kids out to have a play at the end of a rope. And lakes are great things for showing them maps and whatever, because it's very simple navigation. I tried to stack things up in my favour. I didn't buy a birch bark canoe model because I wanted it, but it's very good for her dolls to go canoeing, isn't it, Maya? Yes. And here we go, this is one of my favourite photographs. But there's a backstory to this. Lena was on a sailboat and we were taking the canoe with us, and the canoe was going through the locks separately to the sailboat, so I got Maya in the boat, and I thought, how do I do both? I either look after Maya, in which case we're taking a lot more time, and then I got Maya to actually hold the rope and pull me through. And I'm going to do a little Maya impression, Maya, and because she was pulling her daddy through. But the other side of it was, the locks, it's like when they drop the locks, there's a good 15, 18 foot to the water, and it's deep water. That was a way of controlling Maya, as well as having a bit of fun. So I'm thinking ahead on things with it like this. Bit of camping, favourite books, favourite toys. Oh, dogs. This is our previous dog, Dilly. She hated boats to start with. We had to drag her in, and then every time I put the boat on its edge to do certain manoeuvres, she'd go on the other side of the boat, so I was fighting her. But eventually she became a very, very good canoe dog. She read the water brilliantly. And when she looked at rapid, she'd decide where she'd want to be in the boat for the rapid. And on this one, you can see she's in Lena's boat. She behaved differently in our boats because I was more aggressive on my turn, so she'd anticipate what I would do. She was truly reading the water. When the rapid got hard, and I'm pulling a manoeuvre in a mid-rapid, she'd go behind me. And you'd pull your move and this little head would appear under your armpit. Are we done now? Are we done now? But the one day I got this horribly wrong, I was going over a drop with her, and she was asleep with a pull over. She was led on the airbag, pull over the side. I thought, this is going to be really funny when she realises we're going over a big, big drop. And as I came over the drop, she woke up, looked over the drop, and in that instant decided the place to be was behind me. And the shortest route to behind me was via my groin. And as we came over the critical move, the collie buried herself at high speed in my groin. Ah! And I was trying to paddle it down the rapid. I never pulled that trick again. Our current dog, Billy, better known as Billy Bonkers, is a bit lively in a boat. Oh, rescues, you can have a play with different rescues. People come up, well, what do I do, how to get out of this? So if you're going to do things, you haven't done much paddling, get somebody to teach you some rescue stuff, what you can and can't do. Bit from the book from using ropes. Let's have go on. Wildlife. Yeah. Maya, in Canada, if you're naughty, what are we going to do? I'm going to feed her to the bears, if you didn't hear that. Correct answer. Yeah? But we do get issues with wildlife in this country, and anybody who goes on to slow-moving rivers and whatever with swans, some swans become notorious. You know, because I've seen off so many canoeists, they will quite happily have a go. But most are fine. So that was only the other day with some friends. But I put that in to mention paddles. If you're really into taking kids boating, getting them nice light paddles rather than adult paddles and adult sized blades makes a heck of a difference. The kids are sat on the seats. I'm actually kneeling. And once I'm kneeling, it's very hard to make me capsize. Yeah, were you kneeling as well? A bit, thank you very much.
Not at all, look, Elijah.
So although it looks very windy, I'm very comfortable in those conditions. There are two boats, so if there's a problem we can sort out. And to be honest, we're still within swimming distance of the shore at all times. So if you've never done any boating, then really think about where you're going to give this a try. Canals are perfect, as long as you don't mind being run over by a canal barge every now and again. Choose one that's quiet when you first do it. This particular this is the Llangollen Canal, and we set off down this with a friend of ours to do a little trip and an evening out picnic. And actually, Maya's looking back, and she's a bit of an adrenaline junk. She said, "Daddy, where are the rapids?" I had to inform her and disappoint her, there are no rapids on canals. Yeah? You do occasionally get other hazards on canals. And this is the Pontypridd Aqueduct, just down from Llangollen. I just make sure everybody is either all adults are kneeling. I don't like people on the seats there. There's been a lot of problems with stand-up paddle boards going across. The canal authorities get a bit worried about that because it isn't very high. A friend of mine was taking some kids across in kayaks, and one of the kids capsized, came out of the kayak, panicked, wanted out of the water, and he had his leg over that rim. It's 120 feet down to the river below. She grabbed him and pulled him back into the trench. So I now include in my brief, should you fall out, please do not try to get over the side. It's actually hard getting onto the walkway because it's undercut. Because if the barges come through, there needs somewhere for the water to go. Surfing a little wave. And again, let's go back to things you might not know. This is an interesting one. This is in the Ardèche. You can just go and rent a sit-on-top kayak, set off down it. You need no experience. The vast majority of people, in the tens of thousands that go down it, have no experience. This is Blacktooth, which this water level is quite awkward. Just in front of the boat is a rock which is creating a slow patch of water. As an experienced boater, very easy to miss. I just turn the boat on the same angle as the edge of that water, and I slide past it to go where I do. But so many inexperienced people do this. Their nose has just gone into the slow patch, and that's going to pull them across to the right as you look at it. It's basically, if a paddler, it's an eddy turn but not completed. It drags them across and it goes across above Blacktooth. And of course, because they can't read water, they've no idea that's going to happen. Quite a lot of people get hurt there. The French put a rescue team there through the summer, which are pretty useless. They only deal with it once it's happened. The hire companies, when the water drops really low, build little stone walls to divert people past it. On rivers, you will get weirs, man-made structures to keep deep water upstream, or to divert for a mill, or to divert for irrigation. Weirs can be safe and they can be good fun. In fact, within paddling circles, they're very famous ones because they're such good sport. But they can also be deadly because of the water that's towed back in. This, you need to be around people who know about these things. If you're on rivers with weirs and you don't know, walk around them, because what can look very easy can be quite dangerous. This is actually on a natural river, and I just threw somebody in. I wanted some photographs. The guy said, "If I go in, will I be in the book?" I said, "No, you'll be in the book." But he got tossed and turned around several times, so when he came out, it was no longer pretend. It was quite real. I was so tempted to go back with someone else and photograph them in there and not put his photos in just for but I never got round to the second lot of photographs. This is out in France on the Ardèche. This is a glissade. This is a bypass round a weir, which is a lot of fun, as you can tell. Don't swim down those. There's normally a bit of a concrete lip at the bottom. It's not good in a boat, but it's certainly not good out of a boat. The local kids do not swim down them, which is a good sign. And Maya getting a little bit of a wetting. And this is Billy Bonkers. It's great. When I fall in, I can blame the dog.
Is that a good one? Oh dear! Is that the best one ever? Oh,
We've got to have lots of snacks and things as well with us. The reality is, I've swum out my boat numerous times. I swam out the other week with the dog. The customers were very kind. They blamed the dog. They said, oh, when the boat flipped that way, the dog fell across the boat, and it was the dog, Ray. So I've given them a discount on the next course. But it does inevitably end up within the water. So we've started doing a little mini whitewater safety course for Maya. So here am I, supposedly the expert who's written the book, and I'm preparing for the day I cock up. That's what an expert means. Trees. You can guarantee trees will be in the wrong place on a river. River I ran for years, really, really pleasant whitewater river. Very often the first real river trip I would do with customers, and there was one right-handed bend, and because of the rock strata, the strength of the water was on the inside of the bend, which is unusual. It's normally the outside. And the best wave train, the best bouncy waves on the river were immediately after that bend, and I've never gone around that bend without seeing around the bend. So I'd always swing wide, get way ahead of the customers, or put them into the slow water at the side, go around the bend. And one day I swung that corner, and a tree had come down in the last flood, maybe 30 foot of trunk, and the trunk had gone up the bank and lodged, leaving maybe 12 foot of trunk and the whole root ball smack bang in the wave train. I could have avoided it coming around the corner. I guarantee that at least one of my customers would have been in there. That's a lethal situation. It's happened on the River Wye in flood, that the water sweeps to the outside of the bends and you get a tree in the wrong place. With the hire companies, they try to get those out. But it's knowing about things like this. If you're going to go on rivers, go on with the people that got a bit of knowledge. There's the Open Canoe Association, they're really friendly, there's clubs, or get a bit of instruction, but gain that knowledge. Because when it goes wrong, under there is a canoe. And that isn't very powerful water, but it's powerful enough. And when we got that canoe out, this was actually a training exercise. But this is the boat when we got it out. But coming back to, again, this is a trip with Frontier Bushcraft with Paul Kirtley on the Bloodvein River, and this is in Manitoba. And it's a nice water level. We could have come round this rapid tight on the shore while I'm using the camera. We could even just lifted the boats over the ledge, but you're going from flat water, the rapid, and if you're in the right place, there are no rocks, and it goes into a lake. That's as safe as it gets. So you can have a little bit of fun. At this point, seeing I was working, I thought I'd better put the camera down and do something. This is Paul in the back of this boat. So, to me, it doesn't really matter. You know, that's way out into a wilderness trip. You know, that's a 14-day trip we were doing there. Or whether I'm taking Maya on the river and paddling with her, whether I'm doing this or that. All times I'm trying to work out what will go wrong. Can I cope with what goes wrong? And when I've got somebody very precious in my boat, I better have good solutions, because mistakes do happen. And if you're not a paddler but you wish to get into it, try to get around people. Yeah, instructions great, books great. You can buy copies of my book. I even sign it. If you pay me extra, I won't sign it, because that's the standard joke on the internet that the unsigned ones are very rare. but I do charge more for those. The get around people that paddle, a club. The Open Canoe Association is incredibly friendly, but get around people that know water, know that environment, and that is probably more important than all the stroke work. Thank you very much indeed. And if there are any questions, I will answer, but thank you very much. Any questions to be fired, or are you?
Is there any limitations to where you can put a boat?
Yeah, in this country it's really quite strange. Canals is very straightforward. You're meant to have a license. Generally it's not checked, and the license is easy to get. A lot of lakes will tell you what you can and can't do. A lot of rivers, unless they're a navigation, anglers will dispute the fact that we have a right to be there. In Scotland, the laws change. You have an absolute right to be on water. But again, joining a club, people start putting you along there. Some of my local rivers, there's an agreement, and I will stick to the agreement. Others, there's no agreement. Generally, if I know there's going to be a bit of aggro, I wouldn't take my daughter, because I just don't want that. But I'll go and paddle it for myself, because this situation's long way off being resolved.